about to have this rehearsal. I'm about to sit down and write this scene. I'm about to paint this flat for the set design. I don't know what will happen next. I have to let the hemisphere of my brain that isn't in control have some say in the process. That's what we're trying for.
Meditative conversation about the artistic process. This is Brie, like the cheese, and I'm your host, thanking you for making this podcast a part of your day. This community continues to grow, and it truly means the most to have your ears, listener. How have you made time for art today? Whether it be creating the things or consuming the things, I hope the artistic community around you has brought you a sense of belonging and wonder. Speaking of community and the wonders of being together with other creatives, today's guest packs a humongous container of inspiration. The artistic director of the North Carolina-based organization, the Performing Arts Project, zooms in from New York to chat with me. The Performing Arts Project, or TPAP for short, is a nonprofit organization formed by a group of respected educators and entertainment industry professionals to help prepare the next generation of performers. If you are a 25 or younger artist looking for summer training, I recommend this program with my whole being. I've attended TPAP twice now, and I will return as soon as humanly possible. We discuss more in the episode, including the infinite offerings you'll find at TPAP, but be sure to check out the website link in the description for more details on how to audition. Listener, activate your senses and let go of the shoulds. Here is an hour with Jonathan Bernstein. The podcast. I never know how to begin.
Try something you've never tried, or try whatever you want and see if that works.
My first thought is, how do you feel 3 years into the pandemic today?
Oh, wow. What a wonderful but weighty launch. I have so many confusing perspectives and views on these past 3-ish years. You ended your question by saying today, so I'll just be completely honest about where I am today. I feel a little less confused than in recent weeks, but nonetheless overwhelmed by having patted myself on the back in the early going 3 years ago, March 2020. As we sit here now, it's March 13th, 2023. And
Wow.
About exactly 3 years ago, the shit started to hit the fan. And I remember pivoting nimbly to new normals, new ideas of how to cope, who I am in a crisis. And the story turns a little southward in a moment. But like in the early going, I was like, oh, okay, great. Good for you, self, for being not terribly panicky, hunkering down to want to protect the woman with whom I live and myself by extension, but in that order. And I just changed all of my routines throughout the old and brought in a ton of new and disorienting modes of being. I seemed to do it, or so I thought at the time, really effortlessly. And I was like, yeah, great. And I think I stayed in that state of mind longer than I intended to. And then maybe about, I don't know exactly when, Brie, but like, let's call it 3 or 4 months ago. So a good 2.5 years at least.
It's a lot to maintain.
Yeah, I started to realize the way in which my life had become very small, very politicized. And I actually started to, how do I put this, admonish myself for how quickly I was able to change everything and not see the forest for the trees at all, but just to concentrate only on trees. And in fact, leaves of trees. Like I didn't see the forest for the leaves. I was just like, as my head was so down, right? And so I felt sad in a way that I was unable in recent times to see a bigger picture, to see a very sobering glimpse of global suffering, the ways in which other households were coping. And so I feel like in some respect, that pendulum swing was so extreme and so abrupt that it actually, inside of it, it felt like I was doing a good job. But I didn't realize until I think relatively recently that I was blinkered in some very fundamental way. Like I just couldn't see much more than what was like the groceries that were in front of me, okay, now we're washing our mail. Okay, great. This is now how we live.
Right.
Oh, are we not trusting any other human being on the street or in public transportation or in a restaurant or okay, great. That's what I'm going to do. Mistrust is the currency. Great. And it's actually, it worked something fundamental in not wanting to die. I guess I had ceased living to some degree. I know that sounds a little corny, but it's how it felt from the inside. And so I am in the process now, and I think very much today, as to your question, of trying to right the pendulum a bit and try to find my equilibrium again. That's sort of how I feel about that.
Am I right to say that it felt so microscopic?
Yeah.
That the transition into macroscopic was impossible?
Virtually impossible. Yes. I have found cracks in that as I climb my way out of the micro.
I think I can relate. I felt almost the opposite though, but it's the same idea of like quick transitions, feeling so unstable. And so it caused me to live in the present moment. But I think the future now is just such a blur,
right,
that I don't even have yet the skill at my young years of 25, where my prefrontal cortex has just begun. I don't yet have the skill to plan too far ahead.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm seeing that more and more with folks that I know, which makes all the sense in the world because things are less predictable than ever and things were canceled quickly, had been on the docket. And so it's hard to know how to trust what's next.
That mistrust piece that you spoke on too, that feels very relevant today, I think.
Yeah, in ways that are
connections.
Yeah, in ways that are perhaps more subtle and more nuanced and less overt because they were reported on, right? There was journalism on the topic 2.5 years ago about who is a danger to us now.
Yeah.
And it's bizarre to combat an invisible enemy.
Yeah.
I just remember thinking like, show yourself, COVID. Just show your face. Finally.
I need an image.
I need an image. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Sure. And it's weird that it could be anywhere on any surface, on anyone's hand or in anyone's mouth. It's just so bizarre. And the disorientation of that is still, I think, with me, certainly, and I feel with others as well, as I look around, just how to come back from this thing, how to rehabilitate, even just sort of spiritually.
Something that you've taught me, JB, Jonathan Bernstein, is to remember why empathy is a strength and not a weakness. And I think that's so saturated in the performing arts projects programs, the empathy and focus on community rather than isolation and mistrust. But I also would say that it's a hard skill to maintain.
Yeah.
Especially in global turmoil.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? It's so hard. And certainly the pandemic or a pandemic of this nature has made that very thing all the harder. The truth is, as I try to talk about that with other people, in so doing, I am trying to teach myself how to be better at it, for sure. And frankly, I would say I don't think I come by it naturally. I need more help than most in that area. And the Performing Arts Project is very much devoted to those ideas and principles, radical empathy, radical curiosity for each other. But I feel like in some ways we've adopted that posture so we can be helped right there alongside everybody else too.
Well, and I would argue that like the faculty is also a part of the community, because I would rather not be put on like a hierarchical scope. So absolutely the faculty, the facilitators, the interns, the people who are quote unquote leading the space are also deserving of the same amount of empathy.
Yeah, without question. And why not? Just because we were born a little bit earlier doesn't exempt us from our fallibilities or what have you. But yeah, the community is in large part dedicated to the challenges of the sustainment, as you said, the sustainment of that, because it's a muscle. Right. And so in certain sense, the programming that we've all built and evolved together is a gymnasium for empathy. So it's a place for people to work out their empathy muscle and just drop lift, like 800 tons of empathy every day, 24/7.
Picturing like McDonald's play place.
Yeah, totally. So it gets easier. One hopes. Like anything, we feed various wolves in our bodies, in our brains, and so it's a question about which one you want to nourish.
My next thought is to throw you a question that I've always wanted to ask you. Are you ready to catch it?
I'm ready to try.
What started the Performing Arts Project 12 years ago?
Well, that's easy. There were a few of us who knew each other from around town. We, I think, recognized in each other a kind of like-minded impulse to continue learning. And so we found this summer arts training program together.
Can you name who those people are?
I can try. I think there were 10 of us total.
Okay.
So there are 9 other names. Let's see if I can do it. Kimberly Slade, whom you know.
Yes.
Juliet Gray, whom you know.
The wonderful too.
Neil Patrick Stewart.
Yes.
NPS, Lindsay Lab, Dave Clemens, a guy named Rick Pisano, who we remember fondly now in memoriam, Alicia Eagle, who's a wonderful young artist and singer-songwriter that we knew, Monica Raymond. I think I'm 1 or 2 people short. Who am I forgetting? What could I possibly forget? That might be it. I might have been wrong about 10. I think that sounds right.
And a majority of those people are still around.
Correct. And it was just kind of a glint in our eye. We thought this would be kind of a fun challenge, a worthwhile thing to try to build from scratch. And they asked me if I would be the artistic director. And I confessed at first, I said no. And then it kind of dawned on me that the job came with a bunch of people who would do all the stuff that I was fearful of having to do, which is like logistics and administrative stuff and all of the dotting of I's and crossing of T's. And it became clear to me that my job was to just do the fun stuff, which was to dream big and try to create something untethered from how a program like this has been run in the past or should be run. Like this idea of should is a really interesting word to me recently. I've really been kind of meditating on this idea of the word should sort of by definition ties us in ways both good and bad to how things have been done, to our inheritance. So for us, creating a summer program, I wanted to make sure that we were only inheriting things that were of use to us, and we were doing so consciously. I think a lot of inheritance takes place subconsciously, takes place because familiar is safe. And so we tried as best we could, all of us, to disinherit like mad, to just kind of look askance at everything that we were thinking. Were we thinking of it just because we'd seen it, in the wild before? We'd seen it in existence before. And I think that's the only way to try to be original, is to listen to your sort of wildest self, maybe, to unsealing your imagination in novel ways and not preoccupy yourself too much with regard to, wait, I haven't seen that before, so can it be done? Throw caution to the wind and find out. And I know that that's big talk. And oftentimes we default to the mean, right? There are things in which, we defaulted to, and especially in the early going, because we thought, well, we know how that works. That it can be done because of, fill in quantity X, like we'd seen it. We understood it a bit better. And then over the course of the first 2 or 3 years of the program, even those things started to fall away in beautiful and surprising manner.
I love that.
Yeah, it was cool. So that's sort of how it came to be, pretty modestly. And it's grown and grown in really lovely ways. I'm actually really proud of it, which is uncharacteristic for me, to be honest. I'm very tough on the things that I'm involved in. I don't trust being proud as a stance, because I feel like it breeds, laziness maybe, or complacency of a sort that from an artistic standpoint is sort of the enemy, that you're constantly trying to keep at the door, away from your door. So, or outside your door. So, but in this case, I'm very proud is perhaps not the word. I'm very moved by what's happened these past 11 or 12 years, because it brought with it a series of really interesting experiments, both in creativity and sociology, in like anthropology, like a number of things that I enjoy thinking about are brought to your attention all the time in new ways. And because we try to do things differently all the time by design, it's hard to get bored. I think it's nearly impossible to get bored with the task at hand, because the task is now shape-shifting before your eyes. And so that's fun. That's great. And it's brought people like you into my life, which is really enriching.
Thank you. It's so hilarious how I was brought to TPAP, because Instagram is to blame.
Okay.
And I don't love blaming Instagram because it has so many things wrong with it. But the ad that I scrolled through one day was TPAP.
Wow.
And I clicked and I sent in an audition probably within the next week.
Cool.
And I was like, I've never been to North Carolina. I don't live there. Let's go. Let's see what wolves we can feed there, So
yeah.
But I do remember the first day that I got there, I was super late due to a flight, but I jumped into the introduction ceremony that we have together. And you asked a question about Canada. And I think you were like, is anyone from Canada here? Probably not. And I was like, I am. And from then on, I was like, oh, okay, this is good. This is going to be a place where I can take risks and still feel supported. So thank you for that. Just that one question.
You did all the heavy lifting there, it seems to me. You're welcome, but thank you.
I was definitely flexing those gymnasium muscles just in that one moment.
Totally. Yeah, totally. It's not easy, especially the first rep.
Yeah. What really struck me about the place, though, is how much there is. Huh. How many classes, skills, people, colors, sounds there are to those 3 weeks. I'm specifically talking about Panorama, I should say.
Right.
But I think in what you were saying about evolving and changing it every year, there still is such a grab bag of information. It's almost as if, yes, it changes so much, but it also expands the universe. So for me, at least, and going back in 2021 and just feeling like there was still so much more to learn, that curation and that programming, I guess I'm curious about, how do you know where to stop?
That's a great way to phrase that question. I mean, I guess the answer to it is you never do. And that's what creates all of the things you just referenced, all of the colors and the sounds and the people. If you don't stop, I suppose if you just continue to authentically respond to your curiosities as they evolve, then the program can't help but reflect that in some way. And not just me, mind you, but of course, all of us who are helping that curation, contributing to that curation. And then, of course, you have, by late spring, a number of people who have taken you up on your invitation by audition to come join you. And then and only then can you actually really look at the situation soberly and say, well, what should we do for these folks? Don't worry about what happened last year or the year before that or in our history, right? That's sort of completely irrelevant at this point. What about these human beings who are coming to join us, who are honoring us with their time? No small thing.
No.
How can we throw a bunch of new sounds and new colors at the problem without understanding what might come of that, and just let her rip? The one thing I never want the program to be is hypocritical, right? So if we are preaching in some form or fashion the gospel of sound performance technique is not to repeat yourself, right? If you're doing 8 shows a week, or if you're on a film or television set somewhere, it doesn't matter. Either way, you want to respond honestly and truthfully to the moment, to where you are then, right, at that time. And if that's the case, if that's what we're ultimately trying to get people to be in conversation with as an idea, then we can't help but behave that way organizationally, just writ large. The organization has to be as adaptable. And not tether ourselves to, remember that time that we did that thing that worked really well?
Right.
Because if we try to recreate that, it's as sinister an instinct as if you're doing a monologue, you're trying to do it 3 Thursdays ago when it went really well.
Right.
If you try to stage revivals of these things cynically like that, then from the top down, that shit just by osmosis, people understand, oh, wait, they're resorting to the familiar and to the stuff they think works well, then I should too. It's the one thing we cannot afford to do.
Okay.
I think that's always been my principle from the beginning. And it makes for a more interesting experience, but a harder one to manage, because there are just no laurels we can afford to rest on ever. And it's fun and more fatiguing. But guess what? So is the whole art form itself.
You brought that back so well. Yeah. Art is hard.
Art is hard.
It's hard because when it's easy, it's not good.
Totally.
Totally. What you're saying about the replication.
Yeah.
And, trying to restage something that already didn't feel like it was on a stage?
Right. I think that's one thing I come by honestly. My mother, who passed away a few years ago, was an amazing artist. She was a sculptor and a ceramicist and a flower arranger and a jewelry maker. And she taught art in schools sometimes, and she did a lot of different things. But one thing she never did was relax in any sense, really, but certainly from a creative standpoint. She would always say to me when she was starting a piece, like when she was so she was 50 years old when she decided to become a metal welder and create sculpture out of found pieces of steel. And so, and she was mortified. She was petrified of the fire. So what did she know she needed to do? She needed to lean into it. So she bought steel tip boots and a visor and a torch, and took a few classes. Certainly she wasn't, completely reckless, but she essentially taught herself how to weld and make these amazing sculptural artworks. And I saw that, and I was so inspired by it. And she would say to me, I can't start a piece if I know how it's going to end. Like if I know the answer to it, then the question is not actually sincere. The question being, well, what's this new thing? What do I do now? How can you make art that is culturally relevant in some way? If there's an answer to that, then the whole thing's over. So she would, as Kurt Vonnegut says, jump off the cliff and develop your wings on the way down. I saw her making wings in free fall constantly. And that was a terrific inspiration from a lot of different angles, not least of which was I saw an adult with a strong connection to a play drive. I saw an adult who didn't mind being a student and acting like a kid in her kind of wonderful sense of ingenuousness and lack of guile and true interest in the new. So I feel like it's that thing I'm not making up. That's one of the few things. Like I feel like, oh wait, I have that in my bloodstream already. I'm good with that.
Yeah, and to watch like someone focus so much on process.
Yeah.
As they are processing being an older human and being a mother. And I think, not to summarize like what your mother was all about, but there was such a like focus on process and not on product. I'm hearing.
Always. Yep. Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. She didn't know what the product would be.
Right.
So there was no ability to kind of game this system. She was just open-heartedly jumping into the unknown and embracing that sense of being off balance, which I think any great artist can do. Not necessarily effortlessly. It doesn't always come easily. Certainly it shouldn't. Art is hard. Yeah. But but she was okay with looking like a jackass, looking like a novice, making mistakes constantly, learning from them, not stepping on the same brake the wrong way twice, and just like, figuring some stuff out and building a practice.
Right.
So I saw that firsthand, and it was incredibly helpful in ways I'll never be able to really know.
Oh, wow. To bring it a little bit into the performing arts project again, the idea of being on balance is, for me at least, a very centering feeling. Like I do feel like I have my I's dotted and my T's crossed when I am like literally on balance on my leg, like a dancer on their balanced leg. But what I experienced multiple times at TPAP was that if I did feel off balance, I could lean so easily, so in proximity to someone else who is off balance. And that is like a bridge. If I can make an image like that. Yeah,
that's beautiful. I love that. That's so great. Well, if that's the new normal, right? If everyone's doing the same thing, if that's the reality of the place, right, and everyone's jumping, then it's much, much safer.
Well, and I think like if someone is looking into coming to this program, but likes being on balance, likes being centered, likes having an alignment of sorts, I think they can rest assured knowing that there are other people to lean on and to be inspired by and to collaborate with, that I think that idea of being centered will completely like Uno reverse as soon as you get there,
Yeah, I would hope so. I would think so for sure.
Like, do you have students who like at first are so hesitant and close off immediately when they get there?
Oh, without question. Yeah, of course. Of course. In ways that I heartily respect. It's not a sign of anything typically other than just adrenaline and nerves and like here's something. A woman who teaches Alexander technique,
Right.
which is a type of sort of a yogic practice. She taught me recently. Well, she didn't teach me this. She said to me, she pointed out to me that I walk at a tilt. I literally, and this is true about me, I felt this since I was like, I don't know, 12, 13 years old. The way I walk is a little bit like the Leaning Tower of Jonathan Bernstein. Like I just kind of like walk with my head going first and the rest of my body just following imperceptibly, like barely perceptible, like just by fractions of, millimeters.
Right.
And she noticed this and she said to me, it's because she said to me, you prize your intellect and you want to make sure that wherever you go, your brain arrives first. Sort of as the avant-garde to like, just like, the soldiers at the beginning of at the tip of the spear, just to like suss things out, just to make sure that it's safe.
Right.
Just to like intellectualize the new scenario. With each step I take in life, my brain is like trying to assess what's what. And I think that must be true with every human being, but we trust different parts of ourselves to arrive early.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that's very true. My head does arrive first. And so even for me, I feel like I've got to my sense of being on balance is to move my head back a little bit and not necessarily lean exclusively on that chakra, but rather, allow the unfamiliar to happen and to just try to walk a little bit more upright and not do the reconnaissance that I'm accustomed to doing. Just within, again, fractions of a second. And so it happens to students, it happens to me, it happens to all of us. It's how you respond to that. It's how it's again, what you choose to let defeat you. Lots of defeats in store, both at the Performing Arts Project in those 3 weeks of a crucible, but also just generally in life. I mean, defeat is I think completely impossible to sidestep. The tripwires abound, but it's about staying upright as best you can and trusting more skill sets or building more skill sets to cope with whatever new thing is in front of you, so that you can stay equal to the new challenge.
I'm thinking about the posture that you spoke on, and for me, it's definitely my like hips go first, like my pelvic floor goes first,
right?
Due to the way that I grew up training and movement, and I'm a lot more focused on Pilates these days, and so I like really lean back with my head and my heart, and just pull the like the engine that moves my body forward.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the way that we like restack everything, hips, chest, head, if that is allowed to be balanced, if that is the one thing that, remains on balance, perhaps it allows us to be available for the off balance that's happening around us, or the potential for another participant to fall off balance as well, and we can be their anchor.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I don't want to say that like people should be just completely aligned, but I think like anatomically they should.
Sure. Yeah, it helps with the chiropractic bills.
Right. Does that make sense to you?
Complete sense.
Okay.
Yeah, without question. But But I feel like there is something to be said for finding the entirely unfamiliar thrilling. I think really good artists have a sense of wanting to be off balance.
Right.
Like there's nothing better to the right actor in a long running show than to have an understudy go on. Because it attunes your stimuli in a different way, right? It just all of a sudden keeps you honest.
Yeah.
And that should be exciting. I think that's important.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I just feel like even in this conversation, neither of us are completely sure what we're encircling, but we're trying to be but in a beautiful way, right? I mean, I'll speak for myself. Like I don't have a true grasp of this is how I need to live. This is just like I'm positing a series of ideas and theories and seeing what might stick. So even as I talk aloud, I'm trying to formulate what I'm going to have, what I'm going to be like later today. And it this kind of ad lib, this kind of like riff on what I know up to now and how it might inform who I'll be is just also a genuine kind of thrill into an abyss, right? A launch into a series of unknowns. Neither of us have ever been alive today before.
True.
Like it is 3:41 p.m. Eastern as we speak. So 3:42 who knows? Could bring anything. And so it's like just a series of, I guess it's the ability to live as close to the future as possible. Like you and I we're riding on this edge of like as far into the present tense as we dare to go, as we can bring ourselves to go. And so it's great. So the past can inform us, but we can't lean upon it too heavily, or else the future will be compromised. This is how I see things.
Yeah.
And I do think different people grasp that idea in different ways and in their own time.
So it might take a week, it might take 2 weeks. It might not be until the very last day of Panorama, of Blueprint, of Compass.
Yeah, sure, of course.
They grasp a small morsel of that.
Yeah, one hopes that there's revelations along the way that will provide immediate satisfaction of some sort.
Yes,
for sure. But like, yeah, these are more abstract philosophical life lessons that we're trying to grapple with. But I certainly am convinced that totalitarian structures, that is, things that are definitive and set and expected, that's where the should rears its head.
Yeah.
Like those constructs aren't useful to the artist. We have to learn to live in the gray, in the doubt, in true uncertainty, in true, like I'm about to have this rehearsal. I'm about to sit down and write this scene. I'm about to paint this flat for the set design. I don't know what will happen next. I have to let my the hemisphere of my brain that isn't in control have some say in the process. That's what we're trying for.
That is so beautiful, and I'm trying to like figure out a way to segue because I'm so like deep in thought. It for me, it feels like we're in the quote unquote business of human life,
Sure.
and with all the mess that comes with
the human life biz. It's not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But funny enough, it makes me trust humans more when I am in company of others who are doing the same scary thing with me. Yeah. Funny enough. Like we're both scared, but we trust each other.
Right, for sure. And isn't that the whole point of good art, is to make you feel less alone?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the deal. That's the whole shooting match right there. So that's what we have to do. And I really believe this idea that we're all of us completely unique, but that's only true insofar as we're being ourselves.
Yes. Not forcing it is something I'm still focused on in my practice.
Yeah.
Because I want it so bad and I want it to happen now.
Yeah.
But what's lovely about Panorama is there's 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And even at the end of the first week,
I feel like I have tried so many firsts and failed so many times that I feel ready for more.
That's awesome. That's so great. And it's time enough to disinherit the need to dance like Misty Copeland or sing like Sutton Foster or act like Daniel Day-Lewis. Like it's about realizing, oh wait, Daniel Day-Lewis is so fantastic. Tilda Swinton is so fantastic, right? Audra McDonald is such a force. These people are so remarkable, but that's only because they're not imitating anybody. And so we have to try to figure out, they might have had inspirations aplenty, but they do seem sui generis, right? They do seem like just one of a kind completely. Yeah. And so it is our task to bring as much Jonathan Bernstein as I can bear to any room I walk into, as I can bear and see what happens,
Yes. I really enjoyed the fact that your audition process feels a little bit more like what you're saying about it feels like you can get to know the people a little bit more rather than get to know what they're good at.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. And sitting in on auditions this past weekend was such a reinvigorating process of me realizing, oh yeah, we're allowed to know each other and get to know each other, not just audition each other,
Yeah, well said. I'm glad. That's certainly the main goal there.
Have you found like a evolution of how to audition these kinds of programs, or has it always remained the same about getting to know each of these unique people that apply?
I think in answer to that question, it's always remained philosophically the same. I wanted it to feel more like a workshop than an audition.
Okay.
But that said, over time, I feel like I and a few others of us who are responsible for this element of things have been able to finesse some techniques that we use to achieve that goal. So for example, when we're doing live auditions in a room together in person with people and they come in one at a time, there's never a table. For example, there's never a table that separates us as a moat.
Well, that's so different.
Us versus them. It's a audition staple, right? There's a table and the person who's auditioning is on the other side of the table, and I am safely ensconced in my chair over here. And typically I have a writing utensil in my hand and something to write on. And that auditionee is well aware that the thing that I'm writing is whether they're any good.
Yeah.
Which sucks.
It sucks. It puts up such a wall, that table. Yeah.
It's brutal. So no tables, no writing utensils, no paper in sight ever. That is that's a technique that we use. It's important. We also dress down by design. We want to make sure we're not like dressed in any way that could be deemed formal, because again, that by osmosis sends a signal that this is a formal situation.
Right.
So these are, again, like techniques, things that we've sort of built to help all parties concerned, or just to help the knowledge that you were talking about, to get to know each other. It's the weirdest speed date ever.
Yeah.
And that's what you're trying to come up with something that can transcend cocktail party conversation quickly.
Right. And I think in doing so, you're still commenting on the fact that it is an audition. Like it is always baseline. We know that we're trying to figure out something by the end of the 15 minutes, whatever, how long it is.
Right.
But along the way, there is such a breaking down of that stereotype of an audition room. And I watched it in the participants that we spoke with on Saturday. I watched their like normal audition posture at the beginning of the Zoom slowly become more engaged almost.
That is definitely what we're after, for sure. Yeah.
It's really cool to see.
Yeah, it's so much better. So much better that way. Because they're putting their best foot forward. They've been conditioned to do so. No one blames them for this.
Yeah.
But over time, what I'm looking for is the other foot, because it's the more interesting one. And so the best foot forward, like the best foot forward is the polished one, right? The one that you've sort of you start to realize over time it makes you look the best, maybe, or the most talented or the most intelligent or the funniest or the whatever. And it's like, that's all well and good, but it's actually not terribly compelling.
Right.
The things you think you're good at, great. That's fine. That's been established by you. Cool. Let's actually move past that now and see if you're willing to demonstrate or to, sort of contend with the things that you're not so good at, which goes right back to my mom's insistence that she not know how to solve something before she started it. There's bravery in that. And I think that's what we're trying to kind of bring out in everyone, including ourselves.
What would you say to someone who maybe is auditioning digitally when you don't really get to have that conversation or that interaction with them in real time, but you receive monologues, dance pieces, songs, original pieces, poems, a plethora of things that they are proud of and good at and have, packaged together? What would you say to them? How would they curate that package when it's not in person?
Right. The website hopefully says it so that it leads them, toward the path of what ultimately we're looking for. The website compels people to speak to the camera for a minute or two at least. There are a couple of sample questions on the website that are a little bit off the beaten path, to say the least. But if you don't want any of those, if that doesn't evoke something in you, you can just talk about whatever you like. And hopefully that will evidence something that is not necessarily the most polished, the most coached, part of their repertoire. And it is, I confess, the thing I look at first. There's usually like 3 or 4 components to a digital audition, but I'll always go to that personal, we call it the personal ad lib. So even in the language, I'm trying to sort of foster unscriptedness to see what would happen. And
I love that.
Yeah, so that's always my favorite part, and I go to that first just to get a sense of who I'm dealing with.
Get to know each other.
Yeah,
because we're going to spend 3 intense weeks if you come to Panorama, of course.
Exactly.
Together.
Yeah, exactly.
The other strands of TPAP include Blueprint, which is more leaned towards people who are prepping for that college audition, for that.
That's right.
University audition. So I'm interested in hearing about what Bluinifieds are. Did I say that right?
You did.
What is that?
So it's contingent upon you knowing what unifieds are, which is more of an American phenomenon, I suppose. Unifieds is become a sort of in the cottage industry that is the college audition gauntlet in the States.
Right.
They happen in, I want to say, at least 3 cities: New York, LA, Chicago, maybe more. For better, well, not for better and for worse. For better, full stop. I am not very steeped in a great base of knowledge in these things. I think I prefer to keep it that way. But as I understand it, Unifieds happens in 3 or 4 cities in the late winter. And what it's become is, instead of you having to travel to all of the colleges to audition personally for each of them, which can be very expensive.
Right.
Some people audition for upwards of 15, 20 schools. I met a young woman who told me the other day, right? She auditioned for 36 different schools and like universities and colleges and conservatories. So that obviously is just prohibitive from a cost standpoint for most people. Absolutely. And so Unifieds is a moment, 3 or 4 day long festival, essentially, whereby a lot of college reps assemble in this one city. And so the lone student can go to, say, Chicago, for example, which I think is the biggest, and can, over the course of 3 or 4 days, audition for 10 or 15 different places. They're all sort of set up in conference rooms at a big hotel. It's sort of a big convention.
Yeah.
That's what Unifieds are. So at our Blueprint program, one day a week, we do something we call Bluinifieds, which is essentially trying to simulate that rondelay, this kind of intense audition for a bunch of places within the course of a few hours. So over the course of 5 or 6 hours, say, we set up rooms with fake university names, incidentally.
I love that.
Yeah. And so they just kind of go from one room to the next. They have appointments that are made, and so at 2:40, I'm going to go in and do a monologue and 2 songs for this school. And then at 3:05, I've got to go over to this school, which only wants 2 monologues, 1 class, one of which has to be classical, that kind of thing. So there are various requirements set up inside of Bluenifieds, and these rooms are run by different people who are looking for different things.
I want one of the colleges to be named like Blueliard.
I don't think we've used Blueliard, but I'm surprised we haven't, because it's the very type of pun that we are looking for.
It's so great.
Yeah, there's a number of them that the folks who run Blueprint have come up with over the years, which are really hilarious. But Blueliard, I think, might be new. And if you don't mind, I might suggest that to them this summer.
Absolutely do that. I don't mind at all.
I will credit you.
Oh, thank you. I hope the actual name of the university, which I won't say, reaches out, because we can totally do a rebranding.
We sure can. It's kind of like if Blue Man Group founded Juilliard. I'll tell you though, if you're with us this summer, you might even run that room, Juilliard. That's all you.
Amazing.
Yeah. Cool.
That's gonna be so nice for like little Brianna who auditioned for Juilliard and didn't get in. That's gonna be so nice. Thank you. I hope so.
Just desserts.
Yeah. So that's 2 weeks of like super technical, but still fun. Audition prep and Bluenifieds, as I'm now hearing about. And then there's also Compass on camera and Compass for movers.
Right.
And those are 1 weeks.
1 week intensives, and you can do Blueprint and then one of the 2 Compasses, the way the timing works out. So Compass Dance for Movers is one of them, and the other one is Acting on Camera. And they're just as advertised, 1 week long intensives exclusively in that one field to get better at it, to have a base that's safe to mess up in.
Mm-hmm.
And build muscle.
Gymnasium.
I
love it. And then, of course, the wonderful Panorama. I just love it so much. I think what I'm just reading from the website because I did research and I want to.
You did research? Oh, amazing. What does it say?
It says cultivating bravery, collaboration, and finding what you have to say.
That's pretty cool.
It's really cool. I don't know if you wrote that, but it's very well read. And also, one of the things that I love about Panorama is the Choose-a-Palooza days, where like classes can veer off of the 3 disciplines, like acting, singing, and dancing, and go into like, maybe there's time for what your mom was doing with metal wielding, or I think at one point there was like ultimate frisbee. And like, I think it's just so cool that there's all of these one-off rando classes that just also flex a different muscle because we get out of acting, singing, dancing for a little bit. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, this is going to sound a little pretentious, but I'm just about to drop an Albert Einstein anecdote on you, and I apologize in advance. This is really, really kind of obnoxious. But you saying that rando thing that's just like off the beaten path made me remember that Einstein had this phrase, and I believe he called it combinatory play. So to take a break from the math that he was doing, and he would play violin for like an hour a day. And so for him, he combines a combinatory, like he would combine that sense of play, that violin, something about that hour would help his math and vice versa. He was looking for a way in which they were in conversation with each other. And so, if you on a Choose-a-Palooza day, if you go learn about it, there was dream interpretation one year. There was, there's been all manner. There was snake handling. There was, these are all optional, incidentally. Though I myself was dared to go to the snake handling one as a student because I'm petrified of snakes, and I did, and it helped. Actually, it was interesting. A guy came who was like a snake expert, and he brought 2 of his snakes from his personal collection.
Wow! You ran towards the danger there.
Yeah, we all really did, and no one got hurt.
Good.
But there's volleyball, there's garage band. There's different things that are obviously not as far afield. There was this one Choose-a-Palooza, one of my favorites of all time, was the aforementioned Neil Patrick Stewart, who's big into Shakespeare and really knows his stuff. He taught a 4-hour long class just looking at the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet.
Yes, I remember this.
And as you know, with Choose-A-Paloozas, the teacher can cap the number of students for that particular session.
Yeah.
So you could choose to say unlimited if you like, but you can also give it a hard limit. And he said just two people, whoever were the first two people to sign up for Romeo and Juliet, 4 hours, and it was just table work, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't for anyone. It wasn't for performance. We never really dig into that element of things, as you know. It's not about, trying to impress anyone. It's just about the work. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that afternoon, I was wandering around and I was sort of like dipping into various Choose-A-Paloozas to survey the landscape. And I sat in on about 15 minutes of the three of them. It was Neil and two female students who were the first two to sign up. And every half hour or so, they would switch. One would play Romeo, the other would play Juliet, and then they'd rotate. And for 4 hours, they just broke down every frickin' syllable of the beautiful balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet, just for the love of. And I had to leave after 15 minutes because I think I was going to start crying. Like I found it so beautiful that these two young students who didn't have much experience with Shakespeare until that day, got to sit with a guy who knows his stuff and just realize the beauty of the poetry in that sequence and the connection in that sequence. And then after those 4 hours were up, they went to dinner and they're on to something else. And it was like, God damn, what a cool opportunity.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Choose-A-Palooza days are fun for sure.
I'm remembering though, the year I was there was an R&D that looked at the balcony scene. It might not have been Neil, maybe I'm thinking
that's
someone else. Very
possible. Yeah, I think that's right. That does ring a bell, but I don't think it was Neil. I forget.
Yeah.
And then because there was like a physical element to it, right?
Yeah, there was in Wake Forest University, the balcony of that became the stage.
Yes, I remember now what you're doing. That was Neil. Yeah. Okay. That was two different students. Yeah, for sure.
It has to be Neil.
Yep. Yes,
Cool.
That was. Yeah.
I wonder if that came before the Choose-A class. Maybe it was inspired by.
That may well have been, yeah.
But yeah, Choose-A. It is so much fun and so tiring and wonderful. And then another great element about Panorama is the R&Ds, which we just spoke on. Getting to work on an original piece after having 3 different classes or a full day of technique, getting to apply that technique into something that is so original and new. And even for the director choreographer, it's like, we don't know what we're going to do, but we just jump in. I love ending each day with those rehearsals. I think that's so genius.
Yeah, those are really fun. And people are legitimately encouraged to just follow whatever bliss they're listening to most loudly at any given time. Someone comes to me and says, like, I would like to stage chapter 8 of Eleanor Roosevelt's biography and set it to the music of Coldplay. I'm like, and I want to like rehearse it by the swings or like the hammocks in the middle of the quad. I'm like, hell yeah. Are you kidding me? That's great. Yeah. What a cliche. So yeah, it's like, great. Of course. Why not? No one else is doing that.
It's so fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then getting to watch other people's.
Yeah.
And like knowing how hard it is to like dive in and find a product at the end of the process. A small product doesn't have to be fully imagined, but like I feel such empathy and such like excitement for my fellow, participants who also went through that, because I know they're tired and I know like there are other monologues we have to practice and write our stand-up and stuff. So I just, it's really, really, really cool to sit and watch those R&Ds at the end of the 3 days.
Yeah, it's nice sharing. Yeah. It's like an open rehearsal sort of informal environment. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything else I'm missing about Panorama though. Is there anything you want to add to why people should choose that specific program?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's nice to talk about these things in a less recruitment oriented or business like way, but rather just out of enthusiasms. I mean,
so much.
It's great. I'm so happy to hear that from you. And I share it. Those things have made me certainly a hell of a lot wiser. Running them, watching them, it's really been great. There's a whole philanthropic side to what happens at Panorama, at least pre-pandemic. It's a little bit more delicate now coming off of the pandemic. to try to know how to be of best service. But we would fan out, all over town within like a 50-mile radius and go to 10 or 11 different sites, like assisted living facilities, or there's a home for people with muscular dystrophy. There's an elementary school for the hard of hearing, and then just be of use somehow, and that's a fundamental sort of core concept as well to the place.
Yeah.
It's good. It's a great way to spend your time. Jeez. I mean, I feel like I look forward to it. And I try to, in part, because it's not just me, but in doing this with other people, I think we all try to create the place that we wish would have been in existence when we were that age. The place that would have helped us, become ourselves more quickly.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that and for building 11 years of this interrobang of a place, if I can use that word, because you taught me that.
What do you mean by that, though?
The question mark and the exclamation point is exactly how I feel about TPAP.
That's amazing.
Right?
Yeah, as punctuation goes, it comes the closest.
Right? It's like, what am I doing here? But what am I doing here? So I am thrilled that it's happening again, and that it's back in the same space that it was previously, because I know you've jumped around a bit.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh man. I tell you, the only thing about the Performing Arts Project I don't like, literally quite the only thing, is the name. The name, I was outvoted in the early going about what to call it. That was never my choice, if I'm honest. But only because it sounds a little anodyne, right? It's like the Performing Arts Project. First of all, it's a terrible acronym, if we're being honest, right? TPAP is rough. And then just generally, like, the Performing Arts project's a great word. Great. Yes. The other three words, I'm not a fan. The is fairly neutral. I shouldn't come down too hard on the. Yeah, right. But it doesn't say it. It doesn't have the spirit of the place in those four words. And now I'm thinking, like, just Interrobang, just like the Interrobang Project, something like that. That has a nicer ring somehow. That's pretty sweet.
It's a great word too.
Fun word.
So, okay. Well, I'm going to put a link to the website because it seems like there's so much more information to check out there.
Sure.
Is there a deadline on when people can submit digitally?
There's a first round that's coming to a close at some point in March. But no, there's no real deadline. I mean, we will hold spots until they're filled, until we can hold no more. At any point in the weeks that follow, if this is intriguing to you at all, I would encourage folks to look into it and send in a video or meet us on Zoom in real time. And there'll be opportunities to audition through the spring.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And anyone out there who seems like, who isn't repelled by anything we've discussed thus far, like if you've made it this far and you're like, oh, that doesn't sound completely ridiculous, then by all means, we'd love to meet you.
Yes. And I hope to be there. I still have to figure out a couple of travel things, but I'm 75% sure I would love to be there if you'll have me.
You are heartily invited. And I would insist that you run the Blue Yard room at Blueprint if you're there.
That would mean so much to me, truly would. Jonathan Bernstein, JB, thank you for this.
My pleasure. Thank you. So nice to be with you.
Yeah, to have an hour of your time feels really precious and sacred. So thank you for making time.
For me too. Same. Right back at you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to the Artversations podcast. Please help the podcast community continue to grow by clicking subscribe or follow on your podcast platform and leave a review. As well, follow the podcast on Instagram at ArtversationsPod. You'll find photos of the guest you just heard, plus highlights and quotes from each episode. Let's keep the Artversation going. Send in a DM with your thoughts about art and any questions you might have for guests. Special thank you goes out to Jen Marquez and Maxim Bartnowski for their contributions. And thank you, listener. Till next time.